I'd like to welcome everyone today to joining our webinar, Shift Your Money Mindset. We have a great set of topics to cover today. I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Julie Colwell. Julie, you've been a great inspiration, and it's been so fun to work on projects together. Um, Julie has helped design our True Wealth Assessment, which we encourage everyone to take on our website. And we've been talking about what does true wealth mean to each of our clients and everyone that we work with. Our goal is to really highlight that this is an individualized journey for each person. And today we're going to talk about a really important topic around our mindset, our belief system around money, and who better to help us have that conversation, a relational expert, an acclaimed author and speaker. So Julie, I want to welcome you and thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
I really appreciate being here. Thanks for the opportunity to hang out with you and chat some more, Nathan. Thank you.
Our pleasure. Well, in thinking about this conversation, I just reflected on the years that I've been in the industry, and I've been fortunate to be able to uh, spend time with wonderful clients, help individuals, help couples, help families plan for their future. And by doing that, we build a financial plan. We talk about all the different puzzle pieces of a person's financial life, from taxes to investing to retirement planning, estate planning, college funding, cash flow, all of these various topics. And we love those topics. We're professional financial nerds. We'll never turn down a good spreadsheet and dive into the topic around money. But I've also observed that as we build these plans and people map out their future, and we use our financial planning software to talk about what's important to you, what do you envision for the future, that it's a very profound moment when people have like the realization that they're going to be on track, they're financially okay. But I've also noticed that sometimes there's some belief systems that show up in the conversations that can really limit people in terms of how they experience what's available as they plan for their financial future. And it's that belief system that we're going to be talking about today and better understanding it in anticipation of sharing in our conversation just over the weekend. I put together some, I call them personas, just kind of observations that I've had over the years of different personality types or points of view, mindsets that people are expressing. And there's certainly, I'm in this list too. So we all have a belief system, we all have a mindset. But I'll just share a few as we get ready to kick off our conversation. Uh, Here's a few people that I've seen. I've seen Skeptical Sam. This is the person that's just very kind of suspicious. They want to see proof of everything. They want to evaluate the 20 different angles of doing something before they even make a decision. And many times they kind of defer that decision because there might be more proof that emerges that will affect their point of view. I've seen Anxious Alec, and this is a person who is just worried about things that haven't happened yet. And I've seen that even though we might do a financial plan and it looks good for the future, but there's always this anxiety about, well, what if something else happens? And what if we're not looking at all the angles? Never Enough Nate is another person.
Okay.
Maybe that might reflect some of my background and belief system. And that person believes that getting more is better, meaning it's a virtue to work hard and to accumulate, but it's almost like there's a treadmill effect where that person is always on the treadmill, and I find that people, especially when they have career transitions, may experience some challenges by thinking, well, I get my identity from doing something and I always want more, but now my situation has changed, and that can really pose some challenges. Risk Manager Rick is another person that I've seen where they just want to make sure that, hey, every single aspect of risk is assessed before a decision is made. Avoidant Anne. And this is the person who's just like, this is overwhelming. Yes, money's an important topic, but I don't want to deal with it. Or there might be a decision that has to be considered, and it's just much easier not to address that topic, and let's avoid it and move on to other things and create maybe a sense of busyness and activity and as a distraction. Fearful Mike is also someone I've met. He affects or expects the worst case scenario to happen. Well, if it's good today, it's sunshiny today, but guess what? It could rain anytime, and we could all be hit by lightning. Uh, kind of dramatic, but that can show up in different ways. Historical Donna is someone I've met who believes the past is so much better than the present or the future, and they're always kind of enthralled with what used to be and don't necessarily want to think about what could be as possibilities for themselves. Catastrophic Kate, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Maybe, all these bad things might happen and it'll just completely, uh, annihilate any plan. So why should we plan? Because all these bad things might happen. And I'm not sharing these names with any reference to anyone on a call or anything. They just happened to show up as I was in my brain as I was putting those together. But I'm sure that you see those things as well as a relationship expert, Julie. And when you think of personas, what are some of the things that you consider as you see how they fit into a mindset?
First, way to go, Nathan. And I was thinking as you were listing them, I mean, that's almost like a ball team. I mean, which could be a very good risk management, I suppose, keeping your eye on just what scary thing could happen. What a team you've assembled for that. And so way to go into underline personas. The whole idea of personas is they're masks we put on. We learn how to behave that way, generally speaking, from the people in our most close environment when we're growing up. But for sure, the media and cartoons even growing up. I was thinking Scrooge McDuck when you were listing yours. I've got that one from somewhere. So yeah, I love that you can see them and you're aware of those. And you also might start to think there's some essence part of you too that's also like probably at this point in your life driving the bus and taking you forward and not letting all those sort of scoundrels take the wheel.
Well, this has been the catalyst. Conversations like we're having now have been the catalyst to an emphasis that we're placing in our firm around this concept of true wealth. And we love numbers. We were first in line for a good Excel spreadsheet or research paper and diving into the financial details. We love that. But as I mentioned, over the years of working with people, I've wondered and I've seen people kind of wrestle with the question, what's the point of all the money? What's the point of the
Great
wealth?
question.
And
Yeah.
granted, we need money to pay the bills. We need it for stability and security. There's nothing wrong with it. But the question that we want to pose today and invite our listeners to consider is is true wealth or is wealth the end? Or are we looking at something called true wealth, which we invite you to consider? And we aspire to believe that true wealth has nothing to do with money. And you can say, well, whoa, aren't you in the money business? Absolutely. But we're in the business of helping people find the point of the money. What's the purpose? Are you content? Are you finding satisfaction? Are you making an impact with the time that we have together on this planet? So we all have this defined window of time from the time we were born to the time that we leave the world. And the question is, how do we optimize that time? Are we trapped into a belief system that we always think the world is going to end or there's something around the corner that we can't control, so therefore we stay frozen? Or do we think outside that window to say, well, what might be possible? And so we've introduced the concept with your great support, Julie, around true wealth. and we invite people to take the assessment that's on our website. We launched a new website a couple months ago, and if you take about 10 minutes to go through this assessment, it will help identify where you are in the true wealth journey. And the things that we're going to be doing in next year and following years will be to continue to integrate financial topics with what's the purpose of the money. And that purpose can be materialized and focused on what true wealth means to each person. So, in doing this, who better to connect with than a relationship expert like you, Julie? And so, because all of us have a relationship with money, and we protect it, we save it, we spend it, and all of those things have relational connections. So, if you could help unpack why a relationship paradigm or point of view is important as we think about this topic of money, and maybe what parts of our brain are in play, or some of the influences that affect current belief systems.
I love how you set this up and ask the whole question of, yeah, what does the relationship have to do with this? Another thing I was thinking about, how do how do I relate to money? Money can seem like a villain too. Like, oh, I'm at the effect of money. I don't have enough. If I only, and sort of we chase it around. So it really is this separate relationship of it's pretty darn intimate, maybe as intimate as it gets, since it's such a survival based kind of experience. If we don't have it, we all know, we've seen that or experienced that so much of what it looks like if we have it, if we don't have it. And especially thinking back through our, to our ancestors, I have a lot of Scottish ancestors who experienced not having, food, the basic famine during the Depression. Like, to really understand that money takes us to this survival place for a very good reason, because it has been about our survival, and it's been about our ancestors' survival. So yeah, are we going to be, is it going to be the kind of relationship that just grips us, where we just feel like we can't move in this sort of overbearing money experience? Can we find a way to co-create with money, feel more like we're on par, we're doing this together, where we can resource each other, like I can relate to it with kindness or even maybe love, and vice versa, where it feels more flowing and less clenched, less reactive, because it's the reactive brain, reactive physiology that really hijacks us, hijacks our thinking, hijacks our cognitive abilities, hijacks our ability to imagine new frameworks, new possibilities. When we're in that clenched down experience, well, there are a lot of things that are happening, including that our focus gets narrow and our adrenaline is going, and it's all fight, flight, freeze. There are other F's, faint. Anyway, people probably have heard of that, but it really collapses our ability to just function well, cognitively, emotionally, in our other relationships, because we're just kind of operating from this mammalian fear place.
So, speaking of the relationship expression, certainly with money, like you're pointing out, but within relationships with partners or spouses or close family members, another observation is that many times I see one person who is the money champion, meaning I have an interest in the topic, but yet it kind of turns into a control mechanism too, and with good motivation, meaning they want to take care of things, they want to care for each other, care for their family. But I've also observed in couples conversation about money, the person who is more drawn to the topic of money sometimes will over explain things to the other party, their partner. Sometimes the tenor of their voice changes. Maybe they get a little bit louder to make sure their point is being made. And it's another persona in play. What's happening at the brain level when we just start to think about these personas in our existing mindset? And I'd encourage everyone on the call today just to maybe self-reflect, to say, what is my main belief system about money? And so if you can help unpack our
Sure.
our money mindset, and kind of like, how do we start to identify what's behind this money mindset that we have currently?
Because you introduce personas so beautifully. Uh, when we get reactive, some part of us takes over that's rigid, that we've learned, we saw it, observed it growing up. I want to add in when you brought in relationship. And then when there's two, that's really easy for two people to each go into personas. Because again, this money topic tends to trigger us into a reactive response. And so then one might be like, okay, no, we have to have a budget. And the other person might go into a, okay, I don't really know what to do anyway. And you're the person that knows everything. So I'm just going to check out of the whole conversation. Like, and then at some point, this other person, like, but I want to buy things. So I'm going to secretly go buy when I want to. And then, but wait, I saw it on the credit card statement, right? So that's how things can get into big interlock and big power struggle. Even if this person, just the only power they have is to go secretly buy something, right? It's not real power, but it just can feel so locked up. And definitely this is, as a relationship therapist coach, like what are the main topics? Here they are of couples coming in. Sex, but it's hard to talk about. And money. Maybe it's money, sex. And then we get to family, and then we get to chores, but it's these two topics are the hot topics. So issues around money, of course, come up over and over. So,
I,
but at the
it,
brain level, what I'd say is it's our most primitive brain. Uh, People talk about the brain a lot. We can discuss this from different places, but what I'd say is we've got an emotional brain and a very threat-oriented brain, the reptilian, but then the emotional brain comes too, but not happy emotions, anger, sad, scared emotions. So that's what's going on in the deepest parts of our brain, the amygdala, the limbic system, basically, hypothalamus, etc.
this reminds me of an early life stage with my wife Michelle and I. Uh, and this is also under the category of many of our belief systems are framed by our family experiences and the influence of family. So growing up, I grew up in the East Coast of Canada. My father was a self-made entrepreneur, started with nothing, and he built a business and sold it. And after he sold it, we were out having lunch one day, and he looked at the menu and just made the comment out loud, well, I'm just going to, I asked him what he was going to have. And he said, well, I'm just going to have whatever is the cheapest on the menu.
Whoa,
And
wow.
it kind of, I think I was, I forget my age, maybe 11, 12 ish. And I remember feeling concerned, like, oh my gosh, are we like in financial stress here, or there's a lot of problem? And so I asked him, I said, Dad, did you just sold a business, and what, did that go okay? And he's like, oh yeah, it was great. I'm like, well, why are you ordering the cheapest thing on the menu? And he said, it's because it's my habit. And so I had a belief that scarcity, preservation, kind of like delayed gratification, sacrifice, all of those things that um, had an influence in my life would be applied to money. So I marry Michelle, who I grew up in Podunkville, I call it Schitt's Creek of Canada, and and then Michelle grew up in expanded Italian family in Brooklyn, and gifts were used to express gratitude, and a lot of
Wow.
spending, and let's go out and celebrate. And who cares about the cheapest thing in the menu? This is about being together. And so we come together as a couple,
Ooh.
and we had some conflict,
Yeah.
because I'm like, what are you doing spending on this? And she's like, what are you doing not spending? And it really
Yep.
created this point of tension. And we had to work through the issue of family and the influence of our upbringing. Help listeners unpack why the influence of family uh, influences our mindset.
For for I'm just thinking this array of reasons, and so I'll just lay them out. That it's like the soup, like we're marinated, we're born into this. It's the air we breathe. It's you sitting with your dad. That one time he ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, but you probably had been eating right from that particular place anyway, like maybe the cheapest oatmeal or whatever, right? It's not the first time. So being born into that, it's not just, it's the cognitive part, but it's those moments, it's the emotional. um, One of the things that's really interesting to me about how we learn, Gay and Katie Hendricks, my mentors, call this rapid learning. So trauma, if you think about trauma, it's very fast learning. I had a bike accident on a hill once. Every time, years later, I'm down on a hill, I still have my heart beats faster. It was very fast learning. I didn't have to study hills. Like, I wonder how hills and bicycles go together. I got it. We get it deep into our bodies. And so that's partly why it can be challenging to shift, because it's not just, okay, I'm going to have positive thinking now. That's going to be different, but our bodies are like, yeah, no, cheapest thing. Our bodies got it at a deeper level. If I try to shift this, I'm going to start feeling sort of scared, sweaty, like I can't do this. And I want to go back to what's most familiar. So yeah, we hear it. We hear the values, a penny saved is a penny earned. I was thinking about, I wonder how much of my money beliefs come from Benjamin Franklin. It just over and over in the culture, getting that download, but also understanding the emotional components of how it gets set into our bodies.
How do you reconcile the benefit of a money mindset in the sense that there's some positive aspects, when you're vigilant or you're disciplined or you're aware of risk, that's a good thing, but then it can also turn into a limiting thing as well. How do you counsel individuals or couples from a relationship standpoint
Right.
when those things are in play?
Well, one way, and I think you alluded to this, like risk manager Rick, do I have his name right? Because I don't want to misname her. He really helped you. I mean, is that accurate? Like, as you reflect on your experience with him, how's that been for you? Like, what happened?
Yeah, so we Julie and I spoke just before we went live, and I said, one of the things that I've noticed is that I have a strong risk manager persona, which is really good when you're making critical decisions and handling other people's finances. We want to make sure that we're very conscious of that. But I found that it was almost like this loop that would show up where the risk manager persona was leading the way and everything, and I kind of found like, hey, I need to turn this guy off a little bit. So there was some benefit, but there was also some contrast where it wasn't as freeing.
Mm.
So what do you coach people on when they're trying to turn the corner with either a habit or a belief system, or help understand what's going on in their brain and emotions when those things are arising?
You've actually been laying out some tools, so I just want to go through what I've heard you already tell us about. One is you noticed that something was happening. Noticing it's its own tool versus just being on the unconscious. Okay, this is what I do. This is what Rick is there in the background talking to you. uh, and you're like, okay, and it's very just robot like the way most of us live a lot of our lives, partly because it's so much more efficient. If every time we get in a car we have to think, well, how do I make sure I don't crash, let me go through all of the things that could happen, it's not efficient. But if that part of us can just take over, we can just drive, and it's still on the lookout for the threat. So thank goodness these parts of us are in there. However, that's right. If you get risk manager Rick or any of the other of your band, and I want to just say to the listeners here that you might start listing your own personas. And how can you find a persona? A, it's going to be from a reactive survival place. And B, it's going to be telling you things. So what you just said, Nathan, about I just heard it over and over. These parts of us are quite relentless. And apparently 3 a.m. is a good time for them to get our attention. We didn't listen to them all day. So now I'm going to wake you up. Really? But to know that those parts that are from a reactive state, a survival state, are all personas. Doesn't mean they're bad, but to start to be able to pull them apart. So you noticed it and you actually saw it as, okay, this isn't who I am. This is some other part of me that sort of takes over. It doesn't mean that this is not a mental health issue. It's just how we function. It's a very, again, efficient way to go through the day, that one part of me takes over at one point and, oh, now I'm going into the cocktail party. So this other part, right? Here's work, here's home. So to be listening in for what are those personas, who are they, and then and another way to do it is, what's the relentless chain that is not making me happy? What are the thoughts over and over? And who is it that's saying that? Because again, as you were listing all of those folks, each one of them has a different way of talking about this, has a different mindset, different belief system. So you're operating from all of these, sort of, oh, who's in charge now? It's sort of like a king of the hill of personas, who got to flip over the last one.
What I've noticed is that once there's some awareness around the persona or the mindset or this kind of repetitive echo in your mind, there's no button to press or magic pixie dust to sprinkle and ta-da, it's gone. It takes some work. It takes some awareness. What are some steps in the journey that you encourage people to just be aware of after that maybe light bulb moment goes on of, okay, maybe there are some things that I'm seeing in myself when I look in the metaphorical mirror and say, okay, here's a belief that keeps showing up. Kind of what do we do with that?
And of course, a huge challenge here is which beliefs to listen to, which I want to lean into your firm. Like, that's partly what you're doing, I think, is as you sit with people, you're helping them sort through that. Like, what are the beliefs that are actually helpful and adaptive, and you really want those? And then which ones are just party poopers who's taking all the air out of the room and all of the joy out of your life? So I think their personas are not known for creating joy and fun and happiness. They're known for pulling in, bunkering down, and seeing the world from a very much more contracted, narrow place. So I think really it's so much about, oh, I see it now, and then who do I really want to be? How do I really want to be? What mindset do I actually want to cultivate? Because these parts of us have had a lot of time. They've been practicing, some of them since birth, some of them since 11 or 12 years old, but having a different way of thinking about things. And how do we cultivate that? I think becomes a very interesting question.
Hmm. And are there circumstances, people, resources that are beneficial to have in play? Like where does the aspect of sharing these things to another person, a partner, a spouse, a close friend? I mean, what's the effect of that?
A few things I'd say. Um, First, just having community and support is amazing. That connection itself, I mean, so much of our lives can be screen oriented, and we can sort of get into the habit. I read a whole article, I don't know if other people did, about AIs. Somebody put AI in charge of their life for a week. Right, that disconnection can happen, and especially these days with all the virtual experiences we have. But having another mammal around, I really think about this very specifically. We have a dog, people, but mammals help us settle our nervous system. Just sitting here looking at you, looking in your eyes, my nervous system is like, oh, there's Nathan. So it's starting to help me move out of that reactive response into a more open, expanded response. I think of it as creative brain and versus reactive brain. Creative brain is really where we want to be making decisions from. Reactive brain says, no, it's urgent. We got to decide. We need a budget. Creative brain says, well, let's get a good night's sleep. We'll talk about it in the morning. We'll talk about it when we're walking, when we have more access to more of our open-minded thinking. So let's use each other to remember that. As pack animals, we're sort of like gazelles. We're, sitting around grazing, and then if there's a bunch of us, one is on guard and sees the threat, and then we all notice, and then it's very fast. Fear is very contagious, and then we can all run. I mean, it's all automatic, but it can go the other way. Our contagion can go the other way, that as I can maintain a more relaxed experience, as I remind us actually, we're gonna be okay. And you're like, no, or it's actually would be me. Like, you'd be saying, no, Julie. And I'd be like, no, no, the stock market. Right? How many times have you done that in your life? I lean into. I'm guessing many folks do, of, the financial person who says, I know. And that's what happens. It comes and goes. But what you're doing, I think, is loaning us your more expanded state, your wider view of life, while we're in this, my persona would be Chicken Little, the sky is falling. But that's also what we can do in relationships, and literally, because our nervous systems, if one nervous system can stay calm and keep breathing and be connected to things that are, the wider wishes, the bigger intentions, then those reactive survival parts of us can start to settle and come back. This is our natural state. That reactivity is not, even though in our world it can seem like reactivity is the only state.
Mhm.
This
Yeah, in my experience, reactivity, I used to think of it as a strength, which it can be, meaning if there's a loud pop, you want to look around to see where that came from and make sure there's no danger. And that's a good thing. But if our minds are constantly in that state of reactivity, we're kind of looking for the next pop or the bang or the loud noise, and it completely distracts from what's available in the moment, whether it's just good health, whether it's good connections with people, whether it's a sense of what's possible in life. And this is the essence of where our toolkit shines is around building financial plans, because a financial plan is where we're saying and asking our clients, what's important to you? What do you value in life? Well, it might be I want to plan for the future, or I want to make sure my family is well cared for if I'm gone, or a wide array of different things. And there's various financial complexity, kind of like pieces of a puzzle that need to be broken down in the tax area and the investment area and the estate area and the cash flow and all these various college savings and various life stage needs. And so when we create a financial plan, we're taking the step of choice. We're saying, I'm going to be responsible to define what it is that's important to me according to my value system, according to my wants and wishes, and what I envision a possible future to be. And what I found is that when you see some of these things, whether it's in black and white on a piece of paper or on our computer screens when we're sharing our financial planning software with you, it starts to relax people and move them from reactive state to, oh, this is where I'm, this is my net worth. Here's the list of everything that I have. Here's what I owe, my liabilities. I see it now, versus amplifying one piece of all those puzzle pieces. And we look at cash flow projections to say, based upon all these assumptions, what might cash flow look like next year, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, not to try to predict the future, but just to see where we are on our roadmap and how we're tracking. And so I found that the practical reality of taking your finances and taking them from out of your brain onto a piece of paper, a computer screen, a financial plan system, really brings that, it starts to remove that reactive brain and kind of tame it a little bit. And I'm sure there's other exercises that you suggest to people, whether it's connecting to nature or physical movement. Maybe you could expand on those categories outside of our lane of financial planning.
First, I want to appreciate something that I think you all are doing, um, because as people have time and can really consider and space, and they feel they're not reactive, what you just laid out, but you're basically saying we're making the plan from here, from your more expanded, hopeful, or just maybe your wiser self, when we're just chilled out, sitting here, just what do we really want? Because then when reactive brain comes online, and we're like, no, no, to remind, to lean back into this. Oh, remember, we created this when we were in a more when we were in our own wisdom instead of believing this little tyrant that can come along, because reactive brain can be very, very persuasive. Like, no, really, it's true. And then we realize, if it's given some time, and what you were just asking about, other ways to shift our physiology, I would underline that. The main thing that I teach, it's funny, after all my training as a clinical psychologist, and I've trained in lots of modalities, but really it comes down to a pretty basic idea. If I'm in reactive brain, get to creative brain. I mean, really, because most of us function really fine. That's what I've noticed with couples. There was actually a piece of research by John Gottman's Institute where they had couples, and they at those days they were connecting them to all these like heart rate monitors and galvanized skin response things, and so they have the couple in front of the video, and they'd say, okay, now have the fight, go ahead and have the fight, and of course their pulse would go way up, and they'd be all upset. But the piece of research was, and then they just made up, they told the couple, oh, our camera just broke, you need to stop, just stop talking. And the couple sat there for 15 minutes while they were fixing the camera, and they said, okay, go ahead. And what they realized with all of their instruments was they were now had a different couple in front of them because their physiology had calmed down. And what I got from that is basically people can figure out what they need to figure out together, move through the conflicts often. Sometimes they're complicated. Money is complicated, maybe, right? So it's really nice to get other resources. But then when we are resourced, because we walked in nature, because we canoed, because we listened to the birds instead of looking on our phone, because we chose to have that conversation and go hang out with somebody instead of, I don't know, being in VR for the night, right? Because we did the things that would support our physiology to be in a more relaxed, open, connected state. That's how we have access to those wise parts of ourselves and each other.
Hmm. So I would invite people who are listening to share any questions that they might have, and you can just simply type those into the Q&A box, and they'll come to us, and we'll kind of reflect on that. This is very much a personalized journey. It's an individualized journey, so you don't feel
Absolutely.
obligated to share anything that you don't want to if you're asking a question. But I think and I'm going to pose a few questions. Is where do I start? Where do I start? And because what I found is that some people, they listen to this topic and they're like, well, that sounds okay, but I'm just not really there, or
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
it's not ringing my bell, and that's okay. We're all on our individual path, but for someone who's like, okay, I'm more curious about this, what's next? Julie, what would you
I,
coach some
I'd
people?
say a good step in would be, what are my main beliefs about money? Just write them down. And there might be one major belief, but there might be, who knows, 10, the one that you learned from your parents, but then how about the ones from your grandmother or from your second grade teacher when there was snack time, right? So as much as possible, like, what do I think about money? Just write, this is what I think about money. My main beliefs about money are, there isn't enough. What you were describing earlier, what are those beliefs is a great place to start. Then you can say, all right, who believes that? Now, of course, well, I'm the one person. I'm not, but still to start to separate out what you were just describing. Oh, this part of me does, and this part, and you can name them. I love that great modeling, because that adds a little bit of it, just a little more detachment instead of, oh, that is just me. Money is scarce. There isn't enough. It's like, oh, wait a second. That's just an idea. It's a belief. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with the belief, but at least to be able to say, oh, I don't actually know if, do I believe that? I guess I do. Do I? So to be able to see it as separate to some degree, and then also understand that's probably a reactive part. So then you can have the fun of starting to name them and relate to them in a different way. I mean, that's one thing I could do. I would do. Another would be just to notice my physiology and notice when money comes up, what happens for me, how much faster is my pulse beating, et cetera, and versus can I stay in a more relaxed state?
I want to highlight a couple of personas And I'm gonna put never enough Nate and avoidant Ann on the continuum, where never enough Nate says, "I need more." It's virtuous to have more, and
Right.
it makes me I'm contributing to society. I'm caring for my family, and those are all excellent motivations, but there's not necessarily a satisfaction that never enough Nate experiences. And I actually see this for people who are very entrenched in their profession, whether it's a medical profession, an executive profession, it could be any craft. And they're like, I just constantly, I'm working and working and working and working. How does never enough Nate, when it comes time to retire or make a life stage transition, how do they cope with that transition? Because I've seen some
Right.
cases it's been a real struggle. I've seen some cases where it's been an easy transition. What do you advise in that setting?
Well, exactly. There's never enough Nate who is still, and he probably has a close friend called, uh, I don't know, treadmill Tom, right? I mean, right, there's probably a few of them. Well, then we got to keep going. And then suddenly there is no place to keep going to. So how to deal with that is, right. I mean, that's a very specific kind of circumstance. Well, to see that that's not who you are. I mean, we identify with these parts of us. Oh, but if I don't have a treadmill Trudy, who am I? Becomes a very big question. If I'm not in my persona, who am I? Or if they're not in charge. And I remember having that very question myself. So then leaning into, oh, it turns out there is a whole other part, and I would call it essence, just who we are, separate from all of those parts of us that have just learned how to get through in life, especially in a scarcity mindset. But okay, there is the part of me that I can access when I am in nature or when I'm whatever, fill in the blank, playing guitar. That's who I really want to listen to and develop, really cultivate that part of me, especially if the personas have been in charge most of my life.
One of the suggestions is to look for other avenues to apply interest and curiosity that are away from work. I mean, many times we can get entrenched in work mode, and there's always an obligation, there's always a meeting to get to, there's always a follow up. Um, but if we start to think about, oh, as a kid, I used to really like musical instruments, maybe there's an artistic curiosity to explore in physical arts. So um, one of the learnings is to just lean into that and
Mhm.
not just wait until, well, as of this date in 2025 I'm going to be officially retired. No, start planning in advance of that about what other things you might transition to. Maybe it's getting more involved with charities or other social groups that really you haven't participated in enough. I just had a conversation on the podcast, which will be coming out shortly, and a very successful lady said, I asked her, what advice would you give a 20-year-old self? And she said, not to work so much. Like yes, there's virtuous things that come out of it, but there's also things that get missed. And
Mhm.
so considering that perspective, I think, is helpful to those that are on the treadmill, and there is going to be a life stage transition, and to be better prepared for that. On the other spectrum, or just other circumstance scenario rather, is avoidant aunt. So I actually have a daughter, have two daughters, but one in particular is like, said, Dad, I really don't like the topic of money. It just seems stressful. It seems complicated. I'd rather just kind of avoid the topic. And um, for someone in that space, how do they start to cross a bridge from that point to maybe something more engaged on the topic of money, but not so much overwhelmed?
I want to go back to retirement for a quick moment, just to underline. I think people can. I'm 67, so I'm sort of in the middle of the transition myself. Um, can underline. Well, you need a hobby, or you need. I'm not. that you were saying that, but what are you going to do with your time? But I would say also, what are you going to do with your meaning, your need for meaning and relevance? And to highlight those, so it's not just we'll go learn how to knit, but it's also what's really going to fill that meaning experience for you and the sense of purpose. And why do I want to get up every day in the morning? What's my new relevance? And also often I think it is service at some point. Okay, I've been putting this energy and generative energy into generating money. Can I generate service and kind of relevance for myself within my community?
Mhm.
So then coming back to avoidant Annie. Well, right. I, how do we shift it all? Well, first we have to want to. And I'd say for your daughter, we don't know. Maybe she doesn't want to at this point. Maybe she's kind of like, all right, it's nice down here under the blanket. uh, at some point, especially if she's in a relationship with somebody else who's got but really, we've got it right that there might be a pull for her to have to come out of there. And then I would say, knowing, of course, she's your daughter. So she knows now that she's surrounded by these great resources when she finally pokes her head up that will help her come back out of that place of freeze. I mean, it's a freeze response, like, oh my God, I just kind of want to go in a cave. But as we start to move through that and kind of open back up to, oh, maybe this is going to be okay. Maybe I can actually figure out how to do this.
When you're in relationship, we see this in families, and it certainly is evident in couples. In the family context, there's many times the wealth creator, the person who really has been the main activator around the topic of money. And oftentimes within a family, they cast a shadow on other family members. Unintentional, it just is what it is, where it's almost like they're expected to always talk about the topic, or their opinions are the ones that count, and that can really create some tension within the family. And then if we just take it to a very practical level between a couple, where maybe one person is more focused on the money topic and the other person just doesn't maybe feel empowered, um, how do you start to bring more balance in that relational context?
I love this whole topic of power because I think it's this invisible weight that we carry, that people who are that person, I made the money, I know how, I understand money, that kind of sense of power, but not in a happy way, kind of like, but because somebody's got to do it and I did it. And then people around them, or maybe their main person, could be like, oh God, I've got to keep myself sort of my light under the bushel basket. I have to go into this power down experience. And then how people power struggle, because this is unsustainable. Really, this person can't be in this. They don't have a sense of self. They feel bad about themselves. And this person is sort of like, where did you go? I thought I had a partner, but now you're just sort of collapse around me and you freeze up. And what happened to our connection? And so seeing it is the big step, because most of us, as far as I can tell, just think that's how it is. We look around, chain of command, hierarchy, we just assume that's how it is. What I think we actually know intuitively is it isn't how it is, that how we really are as humans is much more like this. This is how it feels good. We're met. Oh, you're my equal. I can step in. There's room. Yeah, wow, this was a big burden for me to carry. This is tough. But as we come back together in a power with experience, there's so much respect and then new possibilities, because, all right, we're in this together. You don't have to be just this driver and I just go along. It's like, oh no, I've got my people. Like I have my person. We've got a team. Even my whole family. I thought I had to do it alone, and how it can just feel so compelling to stay in that to not give up control. But then when people can do that, just kind of loosen it and allow for other people to step in, it's like, oh, what a relief. We're back in this together. We're a team. I love being on a team. Then we can each develop our own talents, but we're in it together. We're not alone.
One of the resources that we're providing as a follow-up, and Amanda, I don't know if we can highlight the financial empowerment workbook, but we have a resource that helps people list and take inventory of where they are with their financial position. So here's the directory you'll see in or table of contents you'll see on your screen. So the first section is my notes, and that's a great place to start to do what Julie said. Here's start to write down. There's just something transformative when you take pen or pencil and apply it to a physical piece of paper and start to write down my belief about money is, and just start to list these things. And maybe there's other ideas, projects, initiatives that you want to pursue. So we've got a couple pages here for notes, and then we go into the section of where there's starting to be an inventory of what I have, assets and liabilities. And many of you who have experienced going through the financial planning process with us are familiar with that exercise. And not that we have to do it every single moment or every year, but just to take inventory of what is in place. And what I've found is when you start to identify the location of assets, the value of assets, the purpose of the assets, it helps move away from that reactive brain state to be more in tune with that creative brain. So Julie, that's something that you've always, and you've mentioned earlier, and I've always talked about, like moving from reactive brain to creative brain. And then that creative brain state is where so many possibilities are in play. Now, granted, if you're jotting all these things down, so we're on the page of where's the money going, and some people say, well, the topic, the word budget is just an evil word, and we're not trying to put people in a paint you in a corner or make you feel overwhelmed, but this is part of gaining control, gaining insight, gaining your own power. Really is what this exercise helps facilitate and activate, so that you can see different things and where the money's flowing, and then you can make choice around, is this what I value? Do I want to modify this? If I'm thinking about the future, will there be more expenses that increase, or will there be expenses that decrease? And how does that really impact my overall planning? So this whole workbook is designed to help you create that inventory so that you can start to have a discussion with your advisor and advisor team and say, okay, here's what I'm seeing, and here's what I feel personally activated around. Because this is all what we do is unique for our clients. For each client has their own personal financial plan. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It's what's important to you. And so this helps activate the whole process. And the other thing that I'll mention as part of our financial planning experience is in the topic of money, and specifically managing money and investments. We always talk about making sure your time frame and your risk level is matched according to the time frame that you need to use the money for. So you might have a whole bucket of money, but you say, how do I use it for this project? Or how do I live off of that as I cross the bridge to retirement? Now I have to draw from my asset base. That's, short-term needs, the money needs to be more conservative. Longer term needs, we want to have more of a focus on growth. You say, well, there's so many things going on in the world. How can I try to invest into this crazy world or crazy stock market? And the media and all these messages are being bombarded about what's next, what's going to happen, what's not going to happen. That's how the media makes money, is to put us in reactive brain. The media's number
Yes.
one mission every day that they wake up is to say, how do we get more people in reactive brain? And it might be a good idea to unplug from media as you start your path to creative brain. And I found that I've greatly limited my intake to media, and it's only a few select avenues that I personally follow. And I call it the attempt to get clean information, not reactive brain information. And
Right.
so when we're building different parts of the portfolio, we want to say, okay, we are in an uncertain future, but how do we navigate that? And how we navigate it is through risk management. We diversify. That is the best way to navigate an uncertain future, is to spread out the risks. So this is my risk manager talking.
See?
And my risk manager says, hey, you don't want all your eggs in one basket. So as we look at all the continuum of uh, types of markets that go up, types of markets that go down. Everyone loves it when things are going up, and no one likes it when it's going down. But when you diversify, you're driving through the steady middle of the crowd. You're not trying to be at the top of everything or the bottom of everything. You're trying to navigate the middle and to not be so high but not be so low. And what that does is create certainty of outcome, because we're here to help our clients plan for a future and then build strategies that give them a high probability of success of those goals materializing. So that's where the principle of diversification is so important. So I think I'd like to wrap up and just thank everyone for attending today, and
Really,
hopefully
yes.
you found this conversation a different, because that's by intent, in the sense that we're not we want you to think about what is purpose, what's the purpose of the money, what's your relationship with money, what's your belief system about money, and then how can we evolve that and support you in your evolution as you plan for what's ahead and make choices around what brings a sense of meaning and purpose and contentment and contribution. Because when you do that, you're completely activating your lifestyle. And the reality is as well that we're as a population, we're living longer, and that's good if we have something to look forward to, and it's good when we want to have the financial resources to support us along that way. So all of these things are in motion, and we're here to support everyone uh, to make sure that they're making the most of what's available to them. Julie, any final thoughts as we get ready to wrap up?
Two thoughts. One is I so appreciate your very uh, creative brain presence. I'm guessing people around you are like, oh, it's nice to be around Nathan because he holds this, like the canoe experience of just going down. Not maybe not the rapids, but like, oh, so I'm really appreciating that and thinking about how you're really bringing the heart back into this conversation. It's not just dollars and cents, not just spreadsheets. They have their place, but also who we really are as humans. So I'm very much appreciating what you're up to.
Well, I'm glad our paths crossed, Julie, and
Yeah,
thank
me
you for
too.
your contribution. Encourage everyone to go online to take our website assessment at planningalt.com. It's under the top. It's in the top right-hand corner, called the True Wealth Assessment. And please give us a call, meet with your advisor and the team of advisors to continue this conversation. So we're ready with helping you build your financial plan, help bring you into creative space, say what's the purpose of this, where are we headed, and how can we live such a meaningful and purpose-driven life. That's what lights us up. So, and we've got all the financial nerd engineering in the lab ready to align it to that end. So I want to thank everyone for attending. We'll be sending out a follow-up email, which will have a link to that workbook that we shared, and encourage you to use it. And please reach out if you have any questions or need for follow-up. Wishing everyone a great rest of the day. Thank you.
Blessings.